Hey folks, back with another video. Let's dive into what stories got my attention today. Starting with the Russian army on Saturday reported a violation of the ceasefire that had ended the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia in November in the breakaway region of the Nagorno-Karabakh. Quote, one case of ceasefire violation was reported on 11 December in the Hadrut district, end quote, said a statement from the Russian Defense Ministry, which has deployed peacekeepers to the region. The Armenian army reported attacks from Azerbaijan on two villages that are under the control of Karabakh forces. The Azerbaijani Defense Ministry said, quote, adequate countermeasures, end quote, had been taken against quote unquote provocations from the other side, but added that the truce was quote unquote currently being respected. Now, a spokesman for the Russian peacekeeping forces confirmed, quote, exchanges of fire with automatic weapons, end quote, telling the RIA Novosti press agency that requests to respect the ceasefire had been sent to both parties. Earlier in the day, Karabakh forces announced that three of their fighters had been wounded in an attack by Azerbaijani forces. Azerbaijani troops attacked Armenian fighters on Friday evening and, quote, three were wounded in the ensuing firefight, end quote, the Territorial Defense Ministry said. Also Saturday, the French and American heads of the so-called Minsk Group, which led talks on the Karabakh conflict for decades but failed to achieve a lasting agreement, met with the Azeri President Ilham Aliyev in Baku. The envoys, Stefan Visconti and Andrew Schofer, are expected in Yerevan on Sunday. Now, one must keep in mind that emotions are running high in the Armenia, and I'm sure that that spills over into Azerbaijan, especially I believe the Azerbaijani government may fear that Armenia may try to reignite the war. Now, I will flat out blame the governments in this matter, both the Armenian and the Azerbaijani, as I believe that after the peace they had that a window of opportunity where both the governments could have used that opportunity to have announced a sort of like a fresh start or negotiation on the region and how to address the concerns of the Nagorno-Karabakh's people. Now, as of yet, my faith in the deal has gone down quite substantially, but as of yet, I think the deal will hold, as I believe the Russians want the deal to hold, and it is their troops that are on the line. However, I will continue to look at any developments in the conflict. The last time the conflict started, it was something of this nature. Hopefully, this isn't a repeat of the previous. Moving on, police have targeted protesters they suspected might coalesce together into violent groups like those who vandalized stores and vehicles at previous demonstrations. The Interior Ministry said police detained 142 people. Long lines of riot officers and police vehicles with blue lights flashing escorted Saturday's march through rain-slickened streets. They hemmed in protesters seeking to prevent the flare-up of violence that marked many previous demonstrations. A police water cannon dosed demonstrators at the end of the march as night fell. Marchers were protesting against a proposed security law that has sparked successive weekends of demonstrations and against a draft law aimed at combating Islamist radicalism. The security bill's most contested measure could make it more difficult to film police officers. It aims to outlaw the publication of images with intent to cause harm to police. Critics fear it could erode media freedom and make it more difficult to expose police brutality. The provision caused such an uproar that the government has decided to rewrite it. There were also protests in other cities. In Lyon, in the southeast, authorities reported 5 arrests among people they said attacked police and sought to loot shops. Now, I fully support the government to do what they can to stop a riot. However, in that quest, I believe the government must not violate the rights of the individual. Those, in my opinion, are very important. Those are fundamentally one of the building. This is fundamentally one of the reasons why we tolerate our government in the West, is that they will respect the right of the individual. Now, detaining people where the police see a credible suspicion is fine, and I believe the French police will most likely process the protesters, and depending on what they find, they will be treated accordingly. And in all, I believe they will be treated fairly. On the other side, I think the protesters have they are free to protest. However, I do believe that there has to be a way to make sure that protesters are organized in a way to reduce the chances of protesters turning into riots. That I believe is important, which I believe is a hard balance where I also think that both the government and the protesters have to be a bit honest about. Now, as in my uh, video some time ago that I did on this issue, I did mention that I have some reservations on the proposed law by the French government, specifically in respect to uh, as it tries to curtail the rights of the people from recording police who are, I believe, public servant, and when they are on duty doing duty, they should be the individual free people should be able to record them. Anyhow, I will continue to look also into this and see how this develops. And developments in our next story are again the weekend protests. The police in Belarus have detained about 70 demonstrators at a Sunday march. The Belarusian rights group Viasna 96, the Spring 96, said as weekly protest demanding the resignation of veteran President Alexander Lukashenko continued. More than 120 marches took place in the Belarus capital Minsk and other cities on Sunday, with numbers at each ranging from dozens to several hundreds, according to local news outlet Nasha Neva. Some protesters marched in outlying residential areas of Minsk, waving white flags with a red stripe in the middle, a symbol of the opposition, and shouting, "Long live Belarus." Now, more than 30,000 people have been detained in Belarus since the start of the protests in August, according to opposition leaders. Now, all in all, one thing is clear as of yet, that the winter is not cold enough this year around in Belarus. I am surprised that the protesters have resisted for as long as they have. This has lasted much longer than I had expected it. Belarus protests show I believe, a method or a mechanism that different people can use to have a successful, effective, and the least disturbing to the lives of the individuals. Holding protest on a free day like Sunday and then go back to work the rest of the week. This might be, I believe, an innovation in how people organize protest and keep them viable. Anyhow, moving on. Several hundred people gathered in central Warsaw on Sunday around midday for yet another anti-government protest spearheaded by the nationwide women's strike. Now, protests have been held regularly on the streets of Polish cities since a late October ruling of the Constitutional Tribunal, which ruled that women are not allowed to have an abortion even if a fetus has severe health defects. The Sunday protests also included representatives of businesses protesting against the pandemic lockdown measures. Now, the mass crowd marched through central Warsaw carrying anti government placards, Polish, EU, and rainbow flags, their path blocked several times by police. The police repeatedly called on the crowd to disperse. Now, police in Poland came under criticism from demonstrators and the opposition for excessive use of force during recent demonstrations. The demonstration was being held on the 39th anniversary of the introduction of martial law in Poland in December 1981. During the demonstration, the organizers compared the police actions to those of the repressions of the communist state during martial law. Protests around the world are, in my opinion, happening, and most of them have two sources. One is that the government's corruption that was present before the pandemic hit, and second is the botched response to the pandemic that has wrecked people's life, both their physical and mental health, let alone the economic catastrophe the government action is building up. However, in the case of Poland, it seems that Polish protesters have a grievance with respect to the decision of their court. Now, that situation is dicey. However, I would urge that the way to counter that is for the protesters to form a political coalition, a political movement that will either introduce new legislation that will satisfy all parties involved. I would urge them to take this, that understand that this is a long game and it must be fought that way. I would urge the Polish people to not politicize their justice system. Bad as it may be, I believe the Polish justice system is still better, and it does have built-in mechanism, and there is the government that can the the government and the justice system can work together to come up to a more, I believe, amicable solution to this. Moving on into Iran, where the justice system, in my opinion, is a joke. Iran's foreign ministry on Sunday summoned Germany's envoy to protest the EU's condemnation of the execution of an opposition figure, describing it as an, quote, unacceptable interference, end quote, in Tehran's affair, state media reported. Ruhollah Azam was hanged on Saturday after Iran's Supreme Court upheld his death sentence passed in June over his role in protests during the winter of 2017-18, among other charges. The EU, in a statement on Saturday, condemned the execution in the strongest terms and emphasized its, quote, irrevocable opposition to the use of capital punishment. The Iranian Foreign Ministry Europe Director in turn told Germany's Ambassador Hans Udo Musil that Tehran, quote unquote, condemned the statement, which it deemed, quote, an unacceptable interference in Iran's domestic affairs, end quote, state news agency IRNA said. Now, Germany currently holds the European Union's rotating presidency. IRNA also reported Sunday that the foreign ministry will summon the head of France's embassy in Tehran. Azam was granted political asylum in France and reportedly lived in Paris before his arrest last year by Iran's Revolutionary Guards, who claimed he had been, quote, directed by France's intelligence services, end quote. The EU's External Action Service had also said Saturday, quote, it is imperative for the Iranian authorities to uphold the due process rights of accused individuals and to cease the practice of using televised confessions to establish and promote their guilt, end quote. France's foreign ministry had likewise decried the hanging, calling it, quote, an unacceptable and barbaric act, end quote, and a, quote, serious attack on freedom of expression and freedom of the press, end quote. Now, I would like to join with those who condemn the hanging of Ruhollah Azam. And Iranian government tried and executed Zam because he organized a protest, which I don't believe is even a crime. I mean, the right to assembly is a basic right of the human, and it comes from their humanity. People have the right to assemble in any number, in any place, provided that they're not violating the property rights of anyone. And Iranian due process, as I see it, is a joke. It is a system based on it's a thousand-year-old system that has not updated with the passage of time. It it is too old. It is an ancient relic that should be put to ancient times. They need to completely revamp the justice system. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you liked the video, then hit that like button and hit that subscribe button for future updates. For comments and anything I might have missed or any criticism you might have, write in the comment section below. And as usual, the sources to the video are in the description box below. And I will see you in the next video.